Welcome to the ABQ Accent, where catalysts, innovators, and risk takers share what their accent is on their work. Like a spoken accent, we all have an inflection or emphasis on where we put our energy. Join us to learn how these folks are putting their accents to work, building their vision of the future, and how you can get involved. Hello, this is Mariah Harrison with the ABQ Accent, and I'm pleased to be here with a new friend, really a couple years, but we're making way in deeper friendship, and I appreciate that. Sila Avcil is the co-founding executive director of New Mexico Voters First, as well as the executive director of New Mexico Open Elections. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I knew that you would show up in your particular Sila style. You look fabulous.
Thank you.
And I thought I would show up in my own just Zia style New Mexico thing today too. And that voice that you have, this presence, this style of your own interactive personality is something that I really love and wanted to share with other people. So today I want to hear more about what brought you to the work, who you are, and a little bit about where you're going, because I know that you have grand plans for the year coming up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see, raised between the United States and Turkey, where you did your high school. You're a double Lobo, as they say. You got your undergrad and master's at school here in Albuquerque. Multilingual. You recently were very active in Imagine ABQ Day because you're one of those co-founding members as well. And you're the co-founder and outgoing curator of Global Shapers ABQ Hub. And I know that even if you say outgoing, you're still active in what they're doing. There's so much to learn there. And now you're very involved in the pro-democracy reform movement. And people might not know what that means. You know, reform can be a lot of things to a lot of people. So this trajectory is where we're at today, and I'd love to hear more. Tell me what brought you to your work.
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I am a dual citizen between Turkey and the United States. And when I first turned 18, I went and registered with the Turkish Republican People's Party, which is somewhat the equivalent of the Democratic Party here in the U.S. And I cast my first ballot. I was so excited to make a difference because since basically I was born, there's been one person in leadership in that country. So it was a big election for my generation because we had just turned 18 and our votes were about to count and our voices were about to matter, right?
Yeah.
And so when I came here to pursue my college education, I was like, wow, there's primaries happening? What are primaries? Like, I get to have a say in who the front runners of these parties are going to be.
Yes.
And then I get to have another vote to, like, actually vote for a candidate who might have a chance of winning. And so being here and experiencing American democracy was such a perspective changing experience for me because I truly felt like my voice mattered and I had somewhere that I belonged and I felt very aligned with certain people, certain parties, certain perspectives, and the diversity and competitiveness of it was very appealing to a lot of young people. We loved the 2016 primaries. I think that was the most competition, but also diverse ideological spectrum that we got, especially from the Democrat side. And a lot of people had different ideas that were all empowered by everybody. And so I really felt like, okay, I'm here now and I can make a difference and I can organize and I can, be an impactful person in my community.
That's amazing. And I love that your formative experience there, it has its own ripple effects in our own state, in our own country, because you're so active, because you took that knowledge of what we don't have or could be having in one place, but what it could look like here and not taking it for granted. And I think maybe not taking it for granted and being proactive is one of the core values that you work around.
Absolutely.
Would you say?
Yeah, definitely. And so I got my bachelor's at UNM. I also got my master's in political science at UNM. I was studying comparative politics and international relations. But during those times, I had to take 2 classes outside of my focus areas. So I was like, okay, I don't know much about American politics. Let's take a class or 2.
Yeah.
And I fell in love, Mariah. I was like, wow, this is so cool. There's all these intricacies that I could be involved in as a normal human being and not a politician. But it was my last semester of my master's program, and I was like, I'm not going to change my concentration right now and do 2 more years. So I fell in love, and then I kind of left the sphere for a little bit. But then I discovered New Mexico open elections, and I also was not very familiar with what pro-democracy reforms were or what they meant. And once I got involved, I was like, wow, these are real things that can lead to real impacts on real people's lives and empower our democracy and make elections more representative and fair and inclusive.
Yeah, and I think that's some of the core language I want to stick around today too, is the work that all of the groups that you're actually a part of right now, in one way or another, are trying to foster inclusion and representation. But I also do have to need to put out a plug for the political science department at UNM, because I had formative experiences there that changed my trajectory. The faculty is incredible. They're so connected, and they want their students to do what you did, is find your way based on your skills and sort of the nature of the current climate. I feel like they're really great at what they do.
Absolutely. Huge shout out to Professor Rocca for making me fall in love with political science, with American political science. And, now that I'm in the community, I can create paths to encourage students that are still at UNM in the political science department to come and be involved, boots on the ground with us, and put together that academic research and background to the real, on the ground work that we're doing.
Just down the street.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think it was Dr. Stanley for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's great.
I know it was. He's great. And in regards to that department, just briefly, the mayor's office works with their internship program. So we take interns from there. And if you ever want to send anybody our way or vice versa, please do. We'd love to continue building that relationship.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you're also, and along those lines, you are engaged in education and helping people learn more about what our elections climate is like. What's the lingo these days? I feel like you are at the center of those conversations, and I'd like to hear more about that. So tell me, what are the structure of these organizations that you're directing right now?
Yeah, so New Mexico Voters First, we are a 501c4 organization. We're technically, advocacy and action. We're technically a nonprofit with the IRS.
Yep.
We can do candidate endorsements, we can give them some contributions, and we can lobby unlimited, and that's the best part. We are a legislative state, and so there are not opportunities for direct democracy, meaning that the people can write their own bills and laws, and if they collect enough signatures, that just becomes the law. It doesn't have to go through anyone else. We don't have that in New Mexico.
Yeah.
About 20 states have it. I don't know which ones off the top of my head. But yeah, so we have to do a lot of lobbying, right? We need to be talking with legislators. We need to be talking with candidates who might become legislators to see if they're going to support our initiatives and to see if we can, educate them a little bit more, because again, these are unsalaried legislators. They don't have staff members, and so we can't expect them to be experts in every single thing. And throughout the legislative session, right, thousands of topics come up, and who can be an expert in all of those things? And so we're here to be a resource for legislators and community members who want to learn more and who are actually firsthand experiencing these injustices within our electoral system. New Mexico Open Elections is a 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit, and that's been around since about 2015. We were founded about in 2015, but until my hire in 2022, it was completely volunteer-based. And so, they would introduce bills, they would build relationships, but because it was totally volunteer-based, it wouldn't, follow through completely in most cases. But since my hire, we've been able to professionalize and organize better and reach more people and, organize more people, make community partnerships with local other nonprofits that are passionate about the issues that we're passionate about. And that group is mainly focused on public education, right? We want the people to know their rights. We want people to know what other states are doing and what we have potential for doing. And, really enfranchising over 300,000 New Mexicans to be able to participate in primary elections is the main goal of both organizations this year and moving into next year.
And we're going to break that down a little bit.
Yeah.
Because even I sort of took for granted some of the things I thought I knew. I'd like for you to maybe dispel your favorite myths or your most least favorite myths around some of this exact information. And I also think that it's called New Mexico open elections for a reason. Like it's got a name because that's its trajectory. That's what our goal and our vision is, right?
Definitely.
Our meaning the larger group. So let's back up just for a second. Voters First has a candidate survey, and you released that recently. So that is sort of who you are encouraging people to learn about and that promote this sort of perspective, right? Talk a little bit about that survey.
Yeah.
How'd you figure those people out?
So the point of the survey was to figure people out, right? I think any organization who has a C4 or a PAC that can give contributions to candidates, they send out surveys just to see who's on their side. So our survey was a single question survey, and we said, would you support legislation, if elected, to allow for semi-open primary elections?
Okay.
And we'll get into the weeds of that, of what that is. And it's kind of like feeling out the lay of the land, which candidates support it, which candidates are on the edge of it, like they want to support it, but they don't know enough, so that we can go back once the survey's done and say, hey, you requested more information, let's meet and let's chat about your concerns and questions you might have, and provide more information. So that was the main point, and then we did give out endorsements about last week.
Right.
Which was a fun process. It goes through our board. They make the final decision. We give recommendations. That's usually how that process works out.
That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Celebrating it.
Definitely.
So where can people find this survey? And the people you're promoting?
So if
or
you
not the survey, because they're not going to take the survey.
Yeah.
The survey's only one question.
That's right.
The outcome of that can be found where?
So it's not posted on our website yet, but hopefully by the time this video is posted, it will be on our website. Okay. So if you go to nmvotersfirst.org, right. It'll be posted on our endorsements page, and it's also all over our social media on Facebook and Instagram right now.
Yeah.
And you can also go there to see who we endorsed in the primary elections. But speaking of surveys, we actually did another survey on the C3 side, on the very educational community outreach side, in partnership with Common Cause New Mexico, Fair Districts for New Mexico, and New Mexico First. And we found, strong support for all these issues that all these groups are advocating for from all the legislators that we surveyed, except for the issue of ranked choice voting, which tends to come up a lot in a concerning manner within the legislature. Some community members, I know some city council members have questions about it. Right. But we think that not negative perspective, but the unknown perspective is mainly because there is not a lot of education happening around ranked choice voting right now.
Right.
And so I think following the legislative session, we're really going to hone in on ranked choice voting / instant runoff, and focus on why it's a good thing and how many states are using it, how many cities across the nation are using it, and why it's very beneficial to increase representation for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you're also looking at it as a first things first. We got to do this particular activity or actions in this legislative session so that we can take the next steps.
Absolutely.
And also for capacity reasons. I think it's really awesome that you were hired to sort of more formalize and systematize the work and have it be more full-time, because even if people don't quite understand it, the best way to go about something like that is, and as valuable as we know volunteers are, someone's got to be holding the pieces together and then seeing the longer vision. So I appreciate your work in that way.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about the educational side, or at least from your educational perspective. You mentioned to me that there are referendums in 6 different states across the nation to open the primaries. But you also, just a moment ago, said semi-open.
That's right.
Let's talk a little bit about what that spectrum is and where you feel like the sweet spot is and why you want New Mexico to go there.
Definitely. I love that question. So currently, only 14 to 16 states have closed primaries. That means that only those registered with a major political party can vote in primary elections. Everyone else has to either change their voter registration or not vote.
And that means, if I may, a primary is the first election leading up to the general election. And the primary election is where anybody and their cousin can campaign, and then we narrow it down.
Absolutely.
So that in the general election, we have fewer to choose from.
Definitely.
Okay, go for it.
And unfortunately, not everyone and their grandmother runs in the primary because it's really difficult to run a campaign. And so we see that a lot of seats are actually uncompetitive, even in the primary. But primaries actually decide 80% of seats in the general election.
Really?
Yes. So 80% of seats are decided in the primary. And so they're the most consequential election that anyone can participate in.
Good to know.
And why we're talking about closed primaries and party affiliation is because currently across our country, 51% of Americans don't identify with either major political party.
Wow.
And they're disenfranchised in these 14 to 16 states from participating in primaries.
You wouldn't know that from mainstream media.
Not at all.
Keep going.
We're trying to talk more about it and, bring more awareness and education around this issue. So in 2024, this year, 27 million Americans could not participate in primary elections this year.
Wow. And
that includes over 300,000 New Mexicans who did not vote in the primaries this year. The Secretary of State reports that 22% of eligible voters in New Mexico voted in the primaries, but eligible voters does not include the 300,000 independents that we have. That could have. And we do have same-day registration, so they technically could vote, but they don't want to go through added barriers to vote in primaries that they equally pay for, just as any registered Republican or Democrat.
Good point.
And so when you include independents in that calculation, we actually only had 17% turnout this primary, which is not representative.
For the entire state of New Mexico.
For the entire state of New Mexico.
That's not representative.
That's not representative. That is not what democracy looks like. And, it's just sad. Being a young person experiencing these elections in this way, it's not very hopeful to see. But that's why I'm here doing what I do, trying to change the system to make it more equitable and accessible for over 300,000 New Mexicans.
I love that. Yeah. Well, in franchising, like you said, we're going to franchise over 300,000 New Mexicans. Back to the spectrum.
Yes.
Open, closed, semi. We're currently closed.
We're currently closed.
We would like to be semi.
We would like to be semi.
This upcoming legislative session.
Definitely. So the 6 states that you mentioned, plus Washington, D.C., actually, they're trying to, so they have ballot initiatives. They have direct democracy. And these 6 states collected signatures for the past, I want to say, well, it depends on the state, but 4 to 6 months on issues completely open primaries, meaning instead of having 2 separate ballots, there's only one ballot, and all candidates are listed on that one ballot. So that's called nonpartisan open primaries. Okay. So you as a voter could show up to the polls on primary day and say, I want this Democrat for my senator, and I want this Republican for my House, and I want this Green Party candidate for my city council, and then so forth down the ballot. These states are also and most of them are also combining these open primaries on the ballot initiative with ranked choice voting. So you would rank your candidates in the primary and say, this is my first favorite person, this is my second favorite person, and so forth. And then the top 4 or 5, depending on the state, which initiative it is, those top X amount of vote getters move on to the general election. So that's how those states are proposing. There's 6 states plus Washington, D.C., and in November, after the election, we will know what the voters decide in those states. And this is a historic moment in American democracy reform movement, because there has never been this many states considering this. Because, like I said, 14 to 16 states have closed primaries. That's because they were founded like that. And the states that don't have closed primaries, they were also just founded like that. So there could be some historic incentives of why that happened. We don't know that.
Imagine.
So following November, the national perspective and eyes are all going to be on New Mexico, because we will be we're the only state that will pursue through the legislature to open our primaries. And if we do pass this bill, we will be the first state in the nation to open our primaries through the legislature in this try.
Interesting.
Definitely.
Wow.
And funny part is, on average, it takes a bill 10 years to pass. And since NMOE was founded in 2015, 2025 is our 10-year anniversary, technically.
It's magic.
It's magic. It's meant to happen. And so these surveys, these, coalition building, working with the community is so important right now for us to, like, continue talking about this issue. And especially if those 6 states pass it, that'll just, like, light a little light at the end of the tunnel for me, in particular, because it's been a long haul and it's not easy work to pass a bill. But yeah, I'm very excited.
Yeah. Let's keep in mind that I'd love to have you back for a follow-up. The lifeline or lifetime of a bill and what it's like for an individual that's working so hard on it so long, and why other people are entirely capable of bringing a bill to our legislative session. They're very accessible as states go. Our New Mexico legislators are very accessible. So congratulations on the work thus far.
Thank you.
This is a critical time. I realize that. Thank you.
Definitely.
And so let's see. I also maybe want to clarify within this lingo that coming into the general election, primaries are over. What would you like for voters to really, or for eligible voters to consider right now before our November election, which is less than 4 weeks away? I would say understanding that they need to be registered. Number one,
Absolutely.
like even if we have same day registration, that can be cumbersome and time consuming to add to the day that you plan to go vote during your work hours.
And it usually does.
And it does. And that there's also, the Secretary of State has really easy to read deadlines on when to register to vote before the day of, so that you can just breeze through. And also that once you're registered, you can still vote across parties in the general election.
That's right.
Right? And that, I think, is also very pro-democratic. That is saying, I have a certain feeling about life and this is what I identify with, but in this particular election, this person meets my needs. Are you on the same page with all that? Then we can build on that.
Yeah,
Am I correct?
Yes, you are very correct.
Okay.
I think a lot of people can relate to that, right? Like, because all of our municipal elections are nonpartisan, meaning you can vote for whichever party aligned people on the ballot that you want. You don't have to vote one party down the ticket. And that we're not there yet in New Mexico. I think we just first need to allow independents to pick a ballot without going through these added loopholes and barriers. And that's what semi-open primaries does, right? So rather than going to the first booth and saying, I want to re-register, and then going to the second booth and getting your ballot, you as an independent would just show up and say, I'm here to vote for this party's primary. And then they would be given the ballot, and then no one has to worry or, feel like they're lying to themselves and their communities because they have to affiliate with this one party or the other officially. And sometimes it takes voters months to re-register as an independent. I get contacted a lot by people who are like, Sila, it took me 4 months to re-register as an independent. And I'm like, that's not acceptable, because we're saying that our system's so easy to use and whatever, but it's really not, because a lot of people struggle. And to begin with, they don't want to change their voter registration, which is why only 1%, which is why only 1% of independents voted in the 2022 primaries. I don't even want to know the numbers for this year's primary, but I did ask Madam Secretary's office for some numbers, and so hopefully once we get that, I will sit and cry about it because it's really sad that we're, disenfranchising a lot of people, and most of these people tend to be young voters. Young voters, voters of color, veterans are more likely to be independent than any, than affiliate with any party.
Wow, that's a whole tangent I want to go on.
I know. That's a whole other day. And also, voters experiencing poverty are more likely to register independent. And so, you know, we're trying to give voice to these communities and empower these communities to say, like, hey, your voice does matter.
Yeah.
And it doesn't only matter once every 4 years when the president's up for election or not. Your voice matters all the time. And, you know, being civically engaged throughout the year, like, see what's on your city council agenda, right? Like, that's been a huge thing in Albuquerque recently.
Yeah.
What's on your city council agenda? Do you care about that issue? You should go and talk about it. You should call your city councilor about it.
Yeah.
You should advocate for things that you want to see changed in your community, because our city councilors are so easily accessible.
Right.
You can just call them or email them or show up to their office and be like, hey, I'm your constituent. I probably voted for you, and I want to see better sidewalks or whatever. And same thing goes for legislative efforts, right? If you know who your city council or your state representative or your senator is, and you try to build those relationships with them. Yeah. And as a constituent, it's even more prevalent to be advocating for your community and for what you think is right.
Yeah. I love that. And I think that's the biggest message too, that you want people to understand, is there are avenues to do this. And there aren't a lot of gatekeepers when it comes to letting people know what your needs and wants are. I know somebody from Boston came to New Mexico, and he was like, I was at this event and the governor was there and so was the senator, and I just walked up and spoke to them, and that doesn't happen in other states. You know, there's a lot of ways that they gatekeep their people or themselves. So kudos to New Mexico representatives for continuing to be accessible, and for you for utilizing those avenues. I know that I'm not going to see you during the legislative session because you're going to be up there walking the halls.
I will be.
I just see that happening. Yeah. We have a little bit of time, barely, left to wrap up. And so aside from really encouraging people to register and make a plan to be there on that day, they can be looking forward to the next round of elections when they have an outcome from the work that you do in the legislative session. What can they do to advocate for this? What's the name of the bill? Give me Cliff Notes.
Yes. So don't have a bill number yet, but once we do, everyone will know about it, hopefully. And I'll obviously let you know, Mariah. Yeah. But the bill is called Semi-Open Primary Elections. We're going to modify the election code to allow for independents to just show up and pick a ballot. If anyone is passionate and interested, especially if you're an independent voter, you need to be involved in this because this is about you. Visit our website.
Say that again. Independents need to be involved because
it's about them. This is about independence, and this is about them having a voice and a choice and finally being heard, and that we want to show independents that their voices matter and that when they show up, we can make a difference.
Okay. Now keep going. You had some other wrap-up pieces.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say our website is nmopenelections.org. If anyone is interested, we have a little volunteer sign-up page. We're looking for people to help us before and during the session to reach out to legislators, write letters, sign petitions, call them, and come and testify in committee. Like, I would love to see more people show up at the legislative session because that is for the public, that we pay taxes so that they can be in there, and we have voices that they need to be hearing every day.
Yeah. Exactly. Thank you. Gosh,
Thank
mic drop. And that's sort of what I would love for people to take away is just that, there are ways whatever your cause is, you can find somebody. Also, to clarify that your particular work isn't to get any one person elected. Absolutely. It is to increase education around this particular activity, and how people can be benefiting from a reform in our democratic activities right now.
Definitely.
Is there anything else you want to leave us with? I will put on the links to the websites, all the websites.
Yes, all the things.
Secretary of State included. And just whatever you think.
I guess one last thing, again, like if you feel very passionate about an issue, during the legislative session, you can go to nmlegis.gov and look up keywords of bills that are being run right there and then. So if you care about women's rights, you can type the word women, and all the bills that relate to women will pop up. And so you can track these bills, where they're going to be, who's sponsoring them. And if you're passionate, you can go and advocate for them. Like, it's really not limited to lobbyists or legislators. Again, like, this is for the people, by the people, and we as the people need to be involved in it.
Rock on. And I feel like I have to put one more thing out there, that lobbyists often get a bad rap. And I think that that's up to the individual lobbyist as to what type of person they want to be.
Absolutely.
And you as an advocate, as an educator, are at the top tier of the positivity of the work that can come out of educating and being a resource for both those individuals who aren't active all the time or really understanding something, as well as the electeds. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you again.
Yes, I hope so.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody so much for joining us, and we hope that you come up for another ABQ Accent.